Welcome to the Paranormal Zone, a program dedicated to giving a voice to the paranormal community. We try on this show to cover all bases, UFOs, Bigfoot. We cover paranormal activity. We cover ghosts and witches. So we really are trying to cover the whole community, mediums, and giving each and every discipline a voice. And what you're going to hear tonight is the voice of a gentleman that runs UFO Index. UFOs, as everyone knows right now, is a very hot subject. It's their story, so you're going to hear more from him than you are from us. So, Ken, welcome to the Paranormal Zone.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ken.
Yeah, so I guess I'll get started. I'm Ken Mullinix. A little bit of my history. I grew up in a suburb of Baltimore, Maryland. And when I was 19, I hadn't really given UFOs a whole lot of thought. But when I was 19, I had what I consider a close encounter with three red amber orbs. And I was basically driving home one night, and I was on Reisterstown Road, and I was making a right onto the street named as High Falcon. And it was about 10 o'clock at night. This was 1998. And I noticed out of the windshield, I kind of looked up, and there was a red light in the sky, really close. My first thought was, oh, it looks like one of those towers, like a radio tower with a red light on it. But this was really close. Right. And I knew there were houses right in front of me. And I look again, I'm trying to think, what is that? And I look up, I look through the front windshield, and there's three glowing balls of red, orange, amber light right above the houses in front of me. And I turned onto High Falcon. I parked the car there. I got out, and I'm looking up right above the houses, and they're kind of moving around each other. These three balls of light, and I'll never forget to this day this feeling of, what the heck is that? And I remember there was a guy to my right getting groceries or something out of the trunk of his car, and I wanted to call out to him, but I was so mesmerized at what I was seeing, I never did. And to this day, I wish I had called out to him so that I had some other eye on this. But these three balls of light, they kind of traveled. They were like row homes on this street, and they traveled right over the houses, and they started to go down the street. And I thought they were getting a little far away. I might lose them. So I got back in the car and tried to follow them. And on this road, High Falcon, there's a field, kind of like a cut through they do when they put in power lines. There was a field with trees on both sides, and they kind of turned down to this field, and they were going through the field. And at this point, they had dropped low, so they were above the houses. And when they got away from the houses, they dropped down low, and they were maybe 4 or 5 feet off the ground. I stopped there at the edge of this field, and I got out of the car again, and I'm just watching three balls of light. They're about the size of a beach ball, a little bigger than a basketball, go through this field at about 3, 4, 5 feet off the ground with trees on both sides. And I'll never forget, it was a full moon, and the full moon was right in the middle of this field. It was down low. And I had this image burned into my memory of three orbs with trees on each side and the moon as the backdrop. And they slowly just floated up kind of towards the moon, up into the sky, and they got farther and farther away until I couldn't see them. So I was completely dumbfounded. And my uncle was staying, he was a truck driver. He was staying with us at the time. I got home, and I said to him, I'm like, you'll never believe what I just saw. And I started to describe, these three balls of light. And he basically finished my sentence. He said, they were flying around each other and doing these strange things. I've seen that. And I said, what do you mean you've seen that? Why didn't you ever say anything about it? But my uncle was not the kind of person who really had to dig things out of him. Later on, come to find out, my dad was a kind of a fisherman, and all he did was fish in his time off. And there's a lake called Liberty Reservoir, kind of right there by where I had my sighting. And my dad was night fishing one time and and saw the same 3 orbs. They flew directly over his head.
So Ken, let me ask this question. Is it possible that the 3 orbs were actually one vehicle?
So no, because they were flying kind of around each other, and there was nothing. I was close enough to them that I could see. There was no solid structure. It was 3 separate orbs. When they were above the houses, they almost looked like they were playing tag with each other. Like they were moving around.
Wow.
They would come closer. They would get farther away. The whole time, the 3 of them were traveling maybe at 3 or 4 miles an hour. So
wow.
Very slow, yeah.
But they're also kind of playing with each other at the same time as they moved.
Now, what town was this in again, Ken? What town?
Are you there?
Yeah. What town was this in?
Reicherstown.
And how close is that to the New York border?
Yep. If anybody wants to look it up on a map, it's Reicherstown Road, Reisterstown, and the cross street is High Falcon.
And how far is that from Washington or, say, the New York line?
So from Washington, D.C., it's about an hour. New York line, I'd say 3 hours approximately.
Okay.
So Ken, do you think there was a tie-in with the power lines?
So back in 1998, I don't remember power lines being there. I think there was just a field. They hadn't put the power lines in yet. I looked it up on Google Maps, and there's definitely power lines there now, but I don't remember seeing power lines back then. They
Bob.
could have been there, and it could be that I was so fixated on the orbs that I didn't notice the power lines. But what I can say is all of these sightings seem to be around or in close proximity to Liberty Reservoir, as well as Soldiers, a nature preserve they call Soldiers Delight. My father, when I was a little kid, I remember him coming home frantic. I was about 6 years old, and he was telling my mother that there was some light following his truck. Years later, after I had my sighting of these orbs, and I was talking to him just about UFOs, he said, do you remember that time I came home and I was frantic? And I said, yeah, of course. He said he was on Soldiers Delight, so that's Liberty Reservoir and then Soldiers Delight and the little back road that goes through it. And a light shone down on his truck, and he stopped and got out. He thought it was a helicopter. He thought maybe a police helicopter looking for something. He got out of his truck, and that light was shining straight down on his truck. No noise whatsoever. So he thought, this can't be a helicopter. He got back in his truck and went to the gas station just to find somebody else to see this as well. The light followed him all the way to the gas station, and he got out, ran in to get the teller to say, hey, you got to come out here and see this. The gas attendant came back out, the light was gone.
That's
interesting. It's an interesting area.
It is.
Yeah.
That sounds like an area.
The common denominator between your dad, your uncle, and yourself was really this Liberty Reservoir.
Right. And I don't know where my uncle saw the orbs. He never told me. He just said, yeah, I saw that before. I never got out of him where he saw them, but my father was night fishing at Liberty Reservoir, and I've done my Soldier's Delight is what they call a serpentine barren. So it's bedrock with extremely high levels of magnesium. So you get odd plant life and insect life. You get very uncommon features. I almost wonder, could that be some kind of connection? But
it could be.
For me, the whole experience for me really changed my views, and it made me think, wow, okay, there's something here. And I know that, why people say, why don't we have photos? If I had a camera, I don't know that I would have used it in that moment, because I'm having a whole paradigm shift in my mind and thinking, am I safe here? I don't know what this is. I don't think I would have pulled out a cell phone if I had a cell phone back in 1998. I don't think I'd be recording it. I just you're like shocked when that's happening that close.
Right. No, it does happen that way. Now, Ken, what's Soldier's Delight mean? Why do they call this area Soldier's Delight?
So I think there's a Civil War connection to the area. Not really sure what happened there, but I think that's where it takes its name from. The Serpentine Barren stuff is interesting because you find rare plants that you don't find anywhere else, rare insects that you don't find anywhere else.
This sounds like a place to go investigate.
Is it possible that this experience has something to do with the plant life, the animal life in that area, the DNA and stuff?
I mean that's a theory that I came up with, just trying to, I look at it on a map and I plot where my dad had his experience, where I had mine, and kind of in the center of that is Soldier's Delight. It's possible, but that area has had many UFO sightings, as well as Loch Raven Reservoir. There's something about reservoirs and water and
to pick up on the issue of a camera and so forth and so on, even back in 1998, cell phones and cameras were still not as popular as they are today. But I think it's worth noting that when we get asked this question all the time, Ken, did you catch it on film? Did you get a picture of it? And I think when you see things like this, or you see a full body apparition or something, your first thought is not to grab a camera. Exactly. The second part of it, most of these experiences are pretty quick. I mean, they might last a few minutes, but they certainly don't last long enough to get prepared to take pictures and so forth off it.
Right.
Exactly. Now, and I remember when I was standing there looking at these orbs, I didn't want to move. I didn't want to yell out to that person getting stuff out of his trunk. I thought they were going to either fly off or come my way. So I didn't, I'm stuck in this dichotomy of not wanting to be seen by them. I don't know what their intentions are, but I want to keep watching, and I don't want to scare it off. So I was shocked. Shock is the best word for it.
Right. And the other thing, though, Ken, is you were driving home, right?
Yep.
So both of my experiences, and I'm a paranormal investigator, and I do it all, okay? And on one trip I did, but the other trip I didn't. One trip we're heading up to the British chicken company there, the BBC in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I'm on the back roads, juggling up Route 1A with the ocean on one side, marshes on the other side. This big thing of light looked like definitely round with red and blue and yellow lights came flying over my car. No sound, no nothing. It was so low, if I had a sunroof, I could stand up and touch it. It went into the woods and dropped.
Wow.
And then another time, I actually had my camera gear because we had gone up there just for a fun day, a group of us. And I was going to go, I took some cemetery pictures doing some ghost stuff up in the White Mountains. But the gear was in the back seat of the car. I'm coming down Route 16 where it bends in Jefferson. And this thing flies right across where 302 is in 16. By the time you get out of the car to get the camera, well, that's long gone.
Exactly.
So that's why I don't think we get these.
So you've had interest in UFO research and sightings since 1998, correct?
So yeah, it's been since '98. When I had that sighting, I didn't really know what to do with it, and I ended up moving to Hawaii and finishing college in Hawaii and selling real estate out in Hawaii. And I always, I kept it kind of in the back of my mind, and I always go back and forth with it. There's periods in my life where I honestly don't want to think about it. I just want to move on with life. And then there's other periods in life where I'm like, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. And, I need to either continue to find evidence or just work on this in some capacity because, so many people, it's still up in the air, and it's debated constantly. Oh, is something visiting us? Is something, and to actually know for a fact, like I've seen it and other people have seen them, but it's almost like until you have that experience, people are always going to be skeptical. So for me, it's kind of been like, I want to do something with this. I don't just want to sit on the sidelines any longer and say, oh, I had this experience. Okay. And keep doing something else. I feel almost like I don't know if duty is the right word, but I want to keep tracking these cases and investigating and trying to get concrete proof. I wish I did have a camera that day or that night.
Now, did you ever see anything in Hawaii? Because that's another hot spot.
I never did. I spent countless nights watching the stars in Hawaii. Never had an experience there. Not sure why, but I did. So I would say I've had two experiences in my life. That one with the orbs was extremely close. I've always seen, lights in the sky and I say, what's that? But there was one other time where this was also in Maryland. This was in Westminster, Maryland. I was probably 12 years old at the time, and my uncle lived on a farm. He had rented this farmhouse, and my mother had just bought a Chrysler LeBaron convertible. And this was the middle of summer, and we went to visit him. And it was night, and she's driving, and the whole driveway is, like, rutted out. Like, tractors have been going through it, and she's got this little car she's trying to navigate. Well, I'm laid back in the passenger seat just watching the stars. And all of a sudden, a large triangular shape is blocking out the stars.
Wow.
Wow. And I'm looking up at it, and I had played flight simulator games. My grandfather worked for IBM. He was an IBM salesman. And back then, he always got the latest, like, flight sim. And I used to play those for hours. So, like, I'm thinking, what aircraft is that? And it didn't, nothing was clicking in my mind. And I noticed, I kept trying to bump my mother on the shoulder. And she's like, she's too busy trying to navigate these ruts in the driveway. I keep telling her to look up, and she never does. And then I notice that if I take my eye off the craft and I look at it through my periphery, I can see there's really dim lights on the bottom. There were 3 really dim lights, one in the center and then one on each side of the I guess, wings, you could call it. So that was interesting. But,
yeah.
That must
so
have been
tell us about,
too.
Yeah, tell us about UFO Index.
Yeah, so what I did to try to, this has really kind of been cathartic for me. I really wanted to kind of find other experiencers. I originally started the website because I was trying to find people that had also seen these orbs. I wanted to know other people's encounters. Mm-hmm. So when I graduated college, I had started a website back then called anxietyclinics.com, and I just would connect anxiety sufferers with clinicians that could treat them. And I wasn't really happy with the way the website development was going. So I learned PHP coding, and I coded the whole site myself. So now I have this skill of coding websites. And I thought, what can I do with this as far as UFO goes? So I developed UFOindex.com, coded it from scratch just to let people, document their sightings. And then, I would take the images and videos they send in, analyze them, and then investigate the noteworthy cases. And that's kind of how it started.
Well, that's really cool. That's something Tom and I have talked about a lot, and that is that, of course, with MUFON the way it is, one of the negatives I always hear from people that have these experiences that they call MUFON comes out, takes a report, and they usually don't hear too much more after that. And they feel like, okay, so I made the report, but I never heard a follow-up, never seen where it goes, because it goes into a database. But what you run seems to me to be more ground level. Is that accurate?
It is. And it's also the fact that I kind of want to make connections with the website. So I have all this data, and I want to start building in code that runs analytics, and maybe we can find some commonalities between these. You know,
Right.
you can submit your report, but I really want to get into, you know, analytics and figuring out, okay, what areas are these occurring? What has the highest percentage of sightings? Right. You know, what other commonalities can we deduce from that?
Well,
it's kind of difficult because you want to pull as much data from the experiencer as possible, but that's also a wall to getting somebody to actually write a report. So what I try to do is the first report that they're, you know, it's basically tell me your story. There's not,
right.
You don't have to fill out too much because I want enough for them to hit send. I don't want them sitting there and just giving up. Then what I'll do is, you know, once I get pictures, videos, or just their account, I'll get back in touch with them and say, hey, this is really fascinating. Can you tell me A, B, and C?
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great way to go. You know, one of the things, the commonality to me is so important, and it's so important in all aspects of paranormal, in my opinion, that we tend to lose that. You know, when we're doing investigations, we do it, we look at all the tapes and everything else, and we move on to another investigation. But like you, I'm trying to put together kind of a model that shows what is the commonality between all of these things. Because I honestly believe that if we could get down to grassroots of that we're going to start to see a story unfold that, frankly, the government isn't telling us.
Right.
You know, for example, do we see more UFO sightings around high-tension wires? Military bases, major highways. It doesn't seem to me there's too much stuff out there, Ken, that shows that kind of connection between all of these sightings.
No, there isn't.
Definitely.
And the other thing, Ken, is
also the national forest.
Right.
You know, there's
national forest.
There seems to be a commonality that when they, you know, when you get into alien abduction research, they really try to get you alone. You know, look at Betty and Barney Hill coming back from Montreal, and they're in New Hampshire. They're on a desolate road.
Right. Route 3.
There's so many cases like that where they kind of they want you alone.
And that's what I was thinking about when I just said that, you know. And the other part about that is these spacecrafts, and I think sometimes we get confused between UFOs, which is unidentified flying objects, which doesn't mean they're alien. It just means there's an object we can't identify. But when we look at aliens, I think that's exactly what they're doing, Ken, is trying not to be seen, so they gravitate towards these places.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, you know, you got Rendlesham Forest. That was a huge UFO incident in the UK. That was around a military base.
Right.
Roswell. Roswell was another one that was way out on a ranch, right?
Right. And then in Roswell, he was talking about Roswell.
Yeah, Roswell, sure.
And then, of course, you have the abductions that took place in the Bridgewater area, out in the middle of nowhere at that time, the Bridgewater Triangle, Ohio. I know a lady that was abducted in Ohio near a military base. Her father was Air Force. They moved them down to Bob Help Me, the Air Force base at the Cape. So they didn't live on base. They lived outside the base in a small town. Right. And she gets abducted again. And with her, she actually still sees her baby today that she never got to see. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. We got back here in the Berkshires, Western Mass, had the Berkshire UFO incident with Thomas Reed back in the 60s.
Yeah, there's a park out there, right? Yeah.
Well, Exeter, New Hampshire also had that.
Yeah.
Right. Had a great sighting. There's so many of them in the New England area that should be looked at. So my next follow-up question, Ken, and Tom, because Tom, you're very into UFOs, I know.
Yeah.
What is a typical? Let's set up the scenario. I send to your website, UFO Index, a sighting. and I send you videos, you look at it, you say, okay, this is worth it, you get back to me. Where does or how is an investigation done at that point?
So if it's local, I'll actually go to the scene.
Okay.
You know, there's some that are not local. I'm actually at a very interesting one down in Georgia that I'm contemplating going to. And it's difficult because, you know, I think back to my sighting, and, you know, these things came and they're gone.
Right.
And,
right.
You know, it's difficult. Cases where there's multiple sightings, it's good to set up equipment, you know, and see if we can catch anything. But
right.
for so many of these, you know, you mentioned MUFON, you put in your report and then it's gone. You never hear back from them. Part of that, too, is that it's like, okay, we've documented what happened, but there's not a whole lot we can do about it.
No.
You know?
Right. Right.
The same pressure where it's like, I wish there's something more that I can do.
Right. If it's local, I'll go out too. But, you know, like you just said, there's a UFO sighting in Haverhill at 8:15.
Right.
I leave my house to get there in 8 minutes, and that thing's probably in England or across the global world somewhere in Saudi Arabia.
But what is left behind, I guess, is the question, right? So there should be a protocol set up because, Ken, as a sidebar to this podcast, that's what Tom and I are working on now, is setting up a field investigation group that would go out. And of course, like we just talked about, there's a lot of wasted time unless we have a protocol to follow.
Right.
But what do you think might be left behind in some of these areas? I mean, radioactivity, for example, or...
So there, you know, it's possible that there's radioactivity. That goes in again to the whole, you know, what's propelling these craft.
Correct.
If you listen and believe Bob Lazar, he has one set of theories. Other people, like Stan Friedman, had another set of theories about what's propelling them.
Right.
Right.
You know, I didn't. I'm reluctant to mention this because I don't know if there's any connection. But after I had my sighting of those orbs, I developed floaters in both of my eyes.
Really?
You know, yeah, and like a lot of floaters. I had to go to the Wilmer Eye Clinic every 6 months because I had posterior visceral detachment in both eyes.
Ooh.
And so it's like, you know, I'm dealing with all these eye conditions now out of the blue. And was there a connection? You know, I can't say that there was. You know, I also, you know, there might have been some Lyme's disease going on at the time. You know, other stuff in my medical history, but it was kind of odd to me that, you know, because other people have had eye conditions after having close encounters. Now, if it was radiation, I would think more along the line of cataracts. You know,
right.
Not so much, you know, drying out of the vitreous of the back of the eye.
Right.
But I don't know. You know, I know people take EMF detectors. They'll take Geiger counters. They'll take these. I don't know if they leave much behind, unfortunately.
Right. The only other thing to look at would be damage to trees, ground damage, the obvious stuff. And that's it. There's not much to look for.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you had a landing zone, for example, Tom.
Yeah.
Okay. In the case of Betty and Bonnie Hill again.
Right.
If you had a landing zone, I wonder if, not now, too many years have gone by, but if you had a report of that. I mean, we have dealt right here in New Hampshire. I have two people that have quite abduction stories to tell.
Right.
One of their biggest problems, Ken, is that it's all a story, right? I mean, half the people are going to believe them and half the people aren't going to believe them. You know, that's just human nature. When Tom and I do an investigation, half of the room, you know, believes what they're saying and the other half thinks it's a parlor trick, right? I mean, that's what we deal with all the time.
Exactly.
But in the case of abduction, there should be some ground. I mean, recent abductions. Now I'm saying within a week. There should be some ground evidence left behind. There should be some, like Tom just pointed out, plants that are bent over the wrong way or burned. I mean, shouldn't we see some of this?
Yeah. I mean, and you would hope that you would.
Yeah. See, I think the problem is that we don't have a universal, let's talk New England for a minute, investigative group.
No.
And offline, because we want to hear the rest of your story, but offline, Tom and I would love to meet with you someday, even if we meet halfway.
Yeah.
To kind of discuss that kind of project where we would have a New England investigative group that we set up protocols for.
Right.
Now, this is difficult, Ken, right? Because most of us are volunteers, so that's always difficult to find people willing to work for nothing. But with the recent sightings, and I think we'd all agree that the government is on the threshold of admitting and announcing UFOs exist, alien life in other planets exist. I don't think anybody today can say, "Oh, we're 40 years away from that." No. I doubt that. I think we might be 10 years away, but we're not 40 years away.
Actually, I got a question too. As we know, about a year or so ago, and I've asked other ufologists that I know too the same question. I'm interested in your answer, sir. We all know that the government came out with the report. The original report was kind of a oddball, 160 some odd since the 1960s. I don't remember the exact number, but it was 160 some odd sightings. I actually don't believe there was 160. I believe there was more. What did you think of the original report coming out? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I kind of felt like it was a bit of smoke and mirrors, just to kind of placate us. That I didn't find, there are so many cases out there that weren't mentioned in that report, and
exactly.
I thought it was interesting timing that David Grush came out right after and said, I did my digging and this is what I found, and it's an amazing time for disclosure.
No, it is.
But whether or not the government's going to formally come out and say, they're going to look really bad. They're going to say, yeah, we've actually had these craft and we've been reverse engineering them since the 40s.
Right. What I was hoping would come out of that report, that's me, this is me talking. So we had the Benny and Bonnie Hill incident. We all know about that in New England. That's a big one. Or the Adirondacks incident in New York. Okay, so the day before or the week before or the week after, the day after, were there any other sightings of UFOs around even the incident in Exeter? The day before, the week before, or the day after, the week after? Were there any other sightings?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And there was... I was working in Exeter years ago, managing a sub shop. And this guy, I missed this. I worked Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and this freaking incident happened on a Wednesday. Bob, you might remember it was probably, I want to say around 2010, maybe 11, 12 in that area. The UFO was seen flying over, and it made every Seacoast newspaper, including the Manchester Union Leader. And kids remember that incident? Well,
yes, yep.
The next day, I had a retired Navy pilot come in to get his sub, and I was talking to him. He said, I saw it, and then I went inside and put on my radios together and stuff, and within 15 seconds, it was seen in England, the same type of shape. So it went right over Exeter, over the big lake, as we call the Atlantic Ocean, right to England.
The big lake.
That's what they call it, the lake.
That's the big lake. That's great.
So, I mean, that's another case that never made it big, but it was in the Exeter News and Hampton Union and for about a week. And people were coming in and talking about it.
Ken.
Back to the status quo.
Yeah.
There's something in the human psyche that just doesn't want to accept. I mean, there's so many cases with so much evidence. You look at Travis Walton and getting abducted from the next to Snowflake in the forest there. And,
right.
He had eight witnesses to it, and he's gone for 5 days. They go back, and there's still evidence on the ground. There's they can look at the growth ring patterns towards the direction of that craft, and there's a major growth only on that side of those trees. And that's long-term evidence.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what I was referring to before.
You go your whole life with people not believing you. It's like, why would you make that up?
Right. Especially that destroyed his life. I mean, if you read the book,
right.
I've heard Travis speak in public. He spoke up in New Hampshire a couple times, in Danvers once or twice. I mean, I've heard Travis speak, and it was not fun for him coming out and trying to explain this, and people still today, treat him oddly.
Right.
And see, that's the other bad part about this is the fact that the three of us really don't know a true number of sightings, visitations, abductions, because people are afraid to come out. They're really afraid of their neighbors, their own families in some cases. But they're also afraid of the government because of what they did to Betty and Barney Hill, what the media does to people just to cover that up. So when you look at in my opinion at least, when you look at UFOs/aliens, there's abductions, observations, and visitations.
Right.
I'm not quite sure that observation can be investigated. I see something in the sky, I get the coordinates, but if the three of us went back a week from now, what are we going to see?
Nothing.
But when it comes to abductions and visitations, I think there's physical evidence if we could get there within a period of time.
Right.
Yeah, you agree with that, Ken?
Oh, I agree completely. I think, the hardest part is getting those reports, because those people are going to be the most traumatized, and they're probably the least likely to jump on my website, for instance, and say, guess what? I was just taken. I think they're going to be traumatized, and they're going to hide it for, who knows
many
how
years.
long, and they might never, ever come out with it.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree with that.
What do you think about the theory that aliens are among us, that they've, in years past, impregnated, our women and stuff, and they're actually living among us? What do you think of that theory?
Well, I read a book. I think it was Richard Dolan who put out a book about that. I think it's interesting because had I not had my sighting, I think I'd be skeptical. But after my sighting and knowing things are coming here, knowing that they're taking people, I really do think they're taking people. After you hear enough reports like Travis Walton, the Berkshire incident, and all those, I don't think it's a far stretch to think that there's a possibility that they're affecting, and maybe they have been for God knows how long,
right,
affecting our genetic course, whether or not for our gains, which I don't know that I believe that. Maybe for their gains,
right?
And maybe I don't want to sound take it down a dark path, but if a very intelligent race wanted to take over a planet, I don't think they would come here with bombs and destroy the planet that they're looking to take over. No. What if they genetically manipulate for long enough until we don't even know that we're alien? I think that's the correct way or the smart way of taking over a planet. So right. Yeah.
No, it is interesting.
And I also, I think you also, Tom, have to look back to Egyptian times when there's plenty of evidence that the Egyptians saw something.
Right.
The construction of the pyramids certainly is questionable as to the engineering aspect of that. But we know that there's been carvings in caves and everything else that date back to Egyptian times that actually show flying machines.
Right.
So when you look at that, you can't explain what that means. Well, does it mean that they've been here for thousands of years?
Right.
That this experiment, this big blue marble we live on, is really an experiment This just happened to last for thousands of years, but we don't know if the alien life on another planet, that time means nothing.
Correct.
Right.
I agree with you on that. And Bob, not too far from our location, and you're out in Mass, in the Ossipee region, in the Ossipee Triangle of Ossipee, New Hampshire, there's actually cavestone carvings under the lake in some lake caves on the Ossipee Lake.
Wow.
Of stuff flying in and out of the water.
Well, sure. I mean, there's been talk that these flying crafts, driven by aliens, assume that they do have underwater. I don't want to say caves, but being able to live underneath the ocean.
Right.
Sure.
Right. I mean, so we don't know how advanced this other universe out there is. It could be I question, frankly, when you look at technology in this country. Now, I'm much older than you two guys. Unfortunately, you probably had your age together, and that's what I am. But, when I look at technology, I mean, I'm 76 years old. I go back to, we didn't have colored televisions.
Right.
So people say, well, that's the evolution. That's what happens. That's true. But track and monitor the kind of technology we've seen come into this country so quickly.
Right.
I mean, we've gone from cell phones 20 or 30 years ago to only a handful of people had them. Today, 12-year-olds are walking around with them.
That is true.
Right.
No, you're right.
I mean, think of that. Think of the technology, and where has that come from? Has that really come from just education and our own scientists and so forth? If you look at the internet, how quickly that rolled out.
Yes, I remember that rolling out. I mean, Bob,
right? And
Bob, I know you're 74 years old, so you and I are the same age, okay? But I remember, I mean, I do education programs for my job that I do, which I keep everything separate, but we do colonial talks and historical talks and stuff, right? So I'll ask the kids, would you like to live in colonial times? And the first thing they say to me is, I don't know. There's no PlayStation. Well, to me, what's a PlayStation? Because when I started playing video games, I had ColecoVision and Atari 2600, and that's all I remember.
Yeah. I think we make a bad approximation of whatever technology we've taken from this craft and have been able to reverse engineer. I think the technology is so advanced. They do say that we've gotten things like the transistor, night vision technology. I think, some of those craft, they said that when they've entered them, they've been able to see outside like it's daytime, even though it's the middle of the night. I think it sparked, our desire to build certain technologies, whether or not we could actually something. I feel like that technology is more advanced.
Hold on a minute. We got tech talk. Bob, you there?
I am now.
Oh, you got lost. I don't know what happened.
The call just dropped. But interesting enough, just when I was talking about technology.
His call dropped on his end. That was
so the guys in the blue suits and sunglasses are listening.
Yeah. Hey, here's a good one. Let's go back in time a little before I was born, I think. And you can help me with this. This guy from Massachusetts created a show. And, of course, it's not reality at the time, but I believe his name was Hanna-Barbera, and I believe it was called The Jetsons.
The Jetsons,
yeah. Remember watching that? I watched the reruns as a kid because I'm a little older than you, Bob. How about you, sir? Did you watch The Jetsons?
I did.
And what'd you think? What'd you think of the technology they used?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It was futuristic.
It was. And here's some.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that anytime that there's been a close encounter, not any time, but there's a lot of the time these beings, it's been said, you look at like the kids from Zimbabwe, the REL school.
Yep.
The craft came down, landed, something came out and put images into the minds of these kids, images of buildings burning and all of this thing. And the main takeaway that all these kids got from that experience was that our technology is bad. And that's happened on multiple close encounters where these beings are trying to put in images into the experiencer's mind that there's something wrong with our technology.
Right.
And is it because we're kind of trying to approximate their technology and we're doing a really bad job of it? Are they talking about our nuclear technology and they realize we might destroy the planet ourselves? Hard to say, but
no, it really is. No, that brings up, I mean, you think of some of the popular movies and TV shows and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at the first one. Bob, you probably don't remember this because I was older than you again. Terminator. Who remembers Terminator?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that was about.
I remember. Yeah.
I know you remember, Bob. I'm just kidding with you. That just, that took alien technology of sorts, even though it was a movie, and they talked about the doomsday because of it.
Sure. Listen, I honestly think technology is a key factor in this conversation because of how quickly it's evolved to where we are today. Look at AI. This podcast isn't meant to get off on subjects about that, but you look at this technology, where did we get this from? We have think tanks that are definitely embedded in mountains somewhere where nobody knows about. What are they working on, and where did they get the data to start with?
Right.
For us to say, you wear a tinfoil hat. Well, maybe I do. Okay, maybe I do. But I'd like somebody to be able to either come on a podcast or somewhere and tell us we're wrong and why.
That'll never happen.
Yeah.
Well,
that's another reason I don't think we're going to have disclosure. This is like a technological Cold War that we're in with every other country that has one of these crap. They're all trying to reverse engineer them.
Right. Exactly. And of course, they really, I've read many books and stories about Roswell that this started the whole thing because they re-engineered what they had found.
Right.
That's how re-engineering actually started. They said, okay, we can take what we got and work backwards. That's re-engineering. And then all of a sudden, our military started coming out with spacecraft that looked much different to us than ever before. Where those designs come from? Some corporal is sitting in a designing booth and says, let's make them look this way. I don't know. I honestly think that's the key to this whole thing. I really do.
Oh, I agree with you, Bob.
And Ken, back to your point, which I thought was very valid, is that, we as people can't give up. I say this in presentations all the time. If you look at the paranormal and you say that out of 10 experiences, 7 of them can be explained. Okay. What about the 3 that can't? Why don't we focus on that?
And that's the problem, Bob. They don't focus on that. They focus on the 7. And
but you see, but the situation is they are us.
Right. Exactly.
They are us. That's why we need to do this. We need to keep pulling together and keep getting the word out.
Right.
Or we're never going to find the truth. No. All 3 of us have one thing in common that I've heard throughout this whole podcast. We're all looking for one thing.
The truth.
The truth. Very few of us make any money off of this. We don't make movies. We maybe write a book. We all know about writing books. Unless you're Patterson, you're not making millions of dollars writing books about UFOs.
No. No, you're barely making enough.
So we're out there trying to find the truth. That's what we're trying to do.
Google Ads just to get in front of
there you go.
So it's just the well that I pour money down, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So when
And I'm
people,
happy to do it. If it leads to something, I'm more than happy to do it. But
so when people call me about abductions, that they were abducted, I look and think, well, did they just want to be heard? Or what are they looking for? And 90% of the time, I'm telling you, they just want their story told because they can't tell it to anybody else.
No, they can't. That's interesting. You're right about that. It's hard to tell their story because, like you just said, you write a book, it's coffee money if you're lucky.
Yeah. And let's face it, we were brought up in a culture that our parents kept saying to us, there's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as flying saucers.
Right.
If you're a girl, you can't be a policeman. If you're a man, you can't be a nurse. Thank God most of those barriers have been broken.
Right.
So I think this younger generation is much more adaptable to hearing stories and at least stepping back saying, okay, is there any truth to this? I do. But it's up to us to get the story out there.
Correct.
No. Ken, how many reports do you get on your database a week or a month?
So it really depends what I put in for the Google ads. I average. It varies, and sometimes there are flaps that occur. So I might get, I might go a day or two with no reports, and then I'll have 5 or 10 reports the next day.
Wow.
Currently, I think I'm at about 1,700 reports on the website.
Oh, wow.
And how long has it been up?
So that 1,700 has been over the course of probably the past 2 years.
3 years.
2 years.
So you're averaging about 500 a year.
Yeah, that's about right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a great effort. I am really just in awe of what you're doing.
Well, thanks. I enjoy doing it, and it kind of varies. I do have months where I get discouraged and I just turn off the Google AdWords, because I just keep seeing the money flow out of my bank account, and I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere with this, and I'll turn them off for a month or two, and then I'll feel like, I feel like I have a much richer life when these reports are coming in and I can do investigations. It's, like I said, it's cathartic for me as well. I've tried in the past. Google won't even put ads on the site. They've really kind of shunned me. I don't know if it's the topic of UFOs, but there's really no way to monetize that website in any respect. It's just using Google AdWords and getting it. Luckily, there's not much competition in this space, so the ads are not expensive. But that'll at least get you right up on top. So when somebody follows a UFO report, I'm there at the top, and I get a lot of traffic that way.
Wow. But there has to be some entrepreneurs, and let's for the sake of this podcast, stick to New England for now at least. There has to be some entrepreneurs in New England, Tom, that are willing to throw some money at this.
Right.
There has to be. Yeah. I mean, there has to be people out there that are, I mean, if you look at some of the grants, I mean, federal government isn't going to give you any grant money, right, Ken? No. But individuals might.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if there was an inflow of cash, you could have. I've always toyed with the idea of having waterproof cameras on top of people's houses that are just recording the sky.
Right.
24 hours a day, things like that. I'm still baffled. There was, in 2015, you had all the Navy pilots off the coast of Virginia saying, we're seeing these things all the time. Well, I would love to do expeditions to go off the coast of Virginia with some, high-powered camera lenses and try to catch some of this stuff. It's baffling to me that more people haven't. You've got so much happening off of the coast of Catalina, off the coast of Virginia, and where's everybody? I would think people would be out there doing that. So they don't seem to be, but, you know, I would love to. If we had a team that could go and investigate these areas, that seem like a no-brainer to me.
Bob, you there?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on tonight with this carrier. I won't mention their name, but
Bob's having all sorts of problems with his phone.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this is the second time it dropped tonight, so.
That's odd. It's not on this end, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So everything's solid here, thank God. Let's hope it stays solid.
So, Ken, if people want to get in touch with you, why don't you give our audience the information, either your website or any other information you'd love to give out?
Yeah, definitely. Anyone can email me at ken@ufoindex.com. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Okay. And what can Tom and I do through podcasts and some other stuff to help you?
Sorry, say that again. I think I lost you for a second.
Yeah, that's okay. I just said, what can Tom and I do either through our podcasts or our websites, our social media sites? What can we do to help you in your efforts?
I mean, I think more conversations like this. I think this conversation has been excellent.
Yes, it has. And we're planning something real big for next year. So we'll be in contact with you to speak.
That would be
working
wonderful.
on something.
As a side note, you know, I'm also a photographer, so I have I have tons of camera equipment. I've got night vision gear. You know, if we ever want to do any kind of just an expedition and just try to get some of this recorded ourselves.
Yeah,
if you have everything we need.
So if I hear something, we'll get a hold of you.
You know what? I really would love to pursue this conversation further. I think Tom and I and you should try to get together in the next couple of weeks. I've still got a couple of hurdles to get over here. I should be back within 3 or 4 weeks. But within that time, I'd love to have the three of us sit down and talk, because I honestly believe if we started to really talk to each other, there's a lot of things that we can do as groups together. Not only to encourage this website. I already know 2 people that I want to give your website to that have unbelievable stories to tell. Let me ask you this question, Ken, because I always get this asked of me. Can they do this anonymously?
Yes. So I don't even make you write a screen name or come up with a screen name. Everything is completely anonymous.
Okay.
And I always try to fight that stigma on the website. That's why people can leave comments, but there's no way for people to attack people in the comments. So I've really tried to design anonymity into the site.
That's great.
For someone's email address, but that's only so that I can contact them if I need more info. That's never posted anywhere on the site, so you can be completely anonymous.
Oh, that's even better.
Okay. Yeah, that's really great. But I really would love to be able to sit down face to face over lunch or coffee or something, the three of us, and see if we can't get a narrative going as to how do we start tying this together.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Because
Tom,
has to be a narrative. This has to start.
Yeah, this ties in, Tom, to the UFO group,
right?
The investigative arm we're trying to get out there.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yes,
so that opens that scope up much wider for us.
Oh, yes. No, it really does. And we just need to keep that scope open and growing and continue to grow it till, we get some stuff going on and start figuring things out, because UFO, and I know that, your background, sir, UFO and all of this stuff all tied together one way or another in this field.
Yeah, I've often thought, at least wondered, is the whole paranormal, the ghosts and spirits that we've dealt with over the last 20 years,
right?
You and I.
Yep.
are they somehow tied into all of this? Is this really kind of everything tied into aliens? You know, Ken said our aliens walk. Yeah, exactly.
We're housing the souls of aliens, basically. We are ourselves.
Yeah. And then,
exactly.
Right. And then, like you said, that place in Baltimore, that Battle Rock, you said was some type of battlefield, right? So if I went in there and did an EVP session, we'll probably and bring some psychics in, we'd probably find some paranormal. And then we got the UFO stuff that you definitely saw. So that ties that. And then you go into the Adirondack Mountains where there was French-Indian War battles, other battles, Indians, natives fighting natives. You got the paranormal there. Then you got the UFO. And then you out of left field come the cryptozoologist saying there's Bigfoot in the same area or Sasquatch or skunk.
Yeah, again, I mean, what if when we pass on, do we cross over to a different dimension? What if that different dimension is an alien dimension? I mean, we've talked about string theory and everything else, and
Right.
We've talked about deja vu and everything. But what if what we really do is we pass on to just a different dimension in time? And that's alien oriented.
That is true.
It's very possible.
That
well,
is so
maybe
possible.
that's their culture.
We're too, our brains, you know, we're too advanced and we have too many experiences in life for that to just all wipe out when we die. It seems like all of this is recorded in some way and it's for some greater purpose, I believe.
Correct.
I do too, Ken. I think the three of us are on the same page.
Definitely. You guys do a lot of paranormal stuff. I do have one paranormal story if you guys want to hear it.
Oh, we got time. Go.
Love to hear it.
Do you know John Edward, the psychic?
I've heard of him, yeah.
So he would do TV shows back in the 90s, 2000s, early 2000s. So he was on Larry King Live one day, and it was his first. It was mid 90s, first time on Larry King Live, and he's taking callers, and people are calling in, and he's doing a little reading for them. So my grandfather had recently passed away. Him and I had one joke between the two of us. They lived in California. I would go out there and run out of socks, and I would always take his socks because I needed socks to wear. This was the only joke him and I had between the two of us. I'd get out there, and he'd be like, am I going to have any socks when you leave? And we would just joke about it. So my grandfather had just died, and it was a live Larry King broadcast. And I said in my mind, I said, you know, if this guy is legit, I want my grandfather to come through right now. The very next call, he says, you know, I don't know if this is for you or for somebody watching at home, but this person keeps showing me socks.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That blew my mind.
That's unbelievable.
So,
yeah.
Whatever happened to Edwards?
I don't know. I saw him on a podcast recently. He's still doing his thing. I don't think he's on primetime TV, though.
Well, there for a while, he was really making big inroads. I mean, he was almost like Nostradamus. I mean, he was. They all these TV shows tried to discredit him, and they couldn't do it in audiences and everything. And yet, it seems to me.
I was wondering myself, like, is he just cold reading? Is that what this is? But when the thing happened to me with the socks, I'm like, I don't. What are the odds? You know, the odds are too great that wasn't legit. So.
Oh, absolutely, they're too great. You're absolutely right. Right.
Oh.
Well, listen, this was a great show, Ken. You were absolutely phenomenal.
Yes, thank you, Ken.
Well,
you were great.
Thank you.
Great.
I really look forward to chatting with you guys more. You know, it takes like minds to get stuff accomplished in this field.
That's the only way you can do it.
I'd love to.
All right.
Yeah, well, I'm going to follow up with you next week with a phone call if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, great. Well, thank you for coming on the Paranormal Zone. This was great. We want to have you back very shortly because I think this is a narrative that we need to keep going. So
that we do.
We hope you'll come back on, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did. I really did. I enjoyed talking to you both. Looking forward to it.
All right. We're looking forward to meeting you. Have a great evening, sir.